Well, let me ask Jonathan, because he's been waiting patiently to say it. He's actually suggesting then that these people are so powerful, whoever these figures are, that they can effectively get round democracy, control governments, control events. Is that credible?
Sort of look at it from another point of view. I'm fascinated by conspiracy theories, and we've been talking about little else for the last hour for the programme. Because there's a saying in Yorkshire I used to work that them that believe nout will believe out. In other words, if you take somebody who's routinely sceptical about everything, you can actually sell them anything. Now, if I went out tomorrow and started a theory that David Shayler is actually, he's one of them. He's not really departed from he's still part of MI6, SIS, and that he's been put amongst us to spread a crazy conspiracy theory about 9/11 and 7/7. In order to discredit the right-thinking people who are beginning to have their doubts. But so if you're, a farmer in Ohio and you're beginning to think, well, it could all have been a plot by the government, then I can say, well, look how nutty these guys are, and so you can discredit them. Now I'm not suggesting that you're actually you're running this campaign as a current intelligence officer. But I'm saying that if I put that out there, I would get believers within a week. I guarantee it. I'm actually researching a book on this very thing at the minute on how to, create your own cult. And it
so you've just written another chapter.
Yeah, you've got another chapter already. This is good value coming in. I mean, don't get me wrong. David's a very credible bloke, and I don't believe he is doing this as a kind of a psy-war operation. But you could put out a rumour that he is. And that's, but
the trouble is, let's come back to this, because you've lived in the world where nobody quite knows what to believe, is it? Because it's not just a three-dimensional, it's a four-dimensional chess game going on here, and you have to try and think what's going on. Let's just pause for our headlines. So it's just coming up to the half hour, so let's just run it. If you're just tuning our way, good evening to you. This is Sky News, and here are the headlines. The father of two British children who died of carbon monoxide poisoning in Corfu has spoken for the first time about their deaths. Neil Shepherd called on tour operators to improve safety standards at resorts. The Ministry of Defence confirmed tonight that a Royal Marine has been killed and other wounded in a battle with Taliban fighters in Afghanistan. George Bush's choice to be the next Defence Secretary, Robert Gates, has admitted he... Talking tonight with David Shayler, who is my guest. Jonathan Margolis is also here. We're going to be talking about life on the moon, maybe, in just a few minutes, but there's so much to respond to, David Shayler, from the emails that have been coming in. I salute you for telling the facts behind 9/11 publicly. I'll always have a doubt, says one emailer. Other one, Anne, says that you're not our usual standard of expert, but I'm not sure what she means by that. All I want to say is I totally agree with what David is saying. Is another one. At last, someone talking sense, make that man Prime Minister. I've been in demolition 15 years, and your guest, David, is spot on. There is something very wrong with 9/11. And a final one at this stage. The minute I saw the Twin Towers come down, I did not believe the planes alone could have caused it. Totally agree with David Shayler. And I think there's one here, just in here, suggesting you belong with David Icke as a rather eccentric gentleman, to try and paraphrasing here, but do you appreciate that? It's such a sensitive topic, even now. I mean, one has to think of the people who lost, British people whose lives were lost in the atrocities of that day, and American lives too. You have to be absolutely certain, don't you, to say that somebody other than terrorists wanted to do that to their fellow citizens?
Well, I wouldn't be doing this unless I'd done the research, and I've checked the source documents. I've, seen the Rebuilding America's Defences document, for example. I have looked at expert reports by a physicist called Dr. Stephen Jones, who is an expert in metallurgy, and he has written a paper called Why Indeed Did the Towers Collapse, and he comes to the conclusion that the most likely cause of the collapse of the Twin Towers and Building 7 is a controlled demolition.
But can you link, I mean, you've thrown accusations at the neocons. Can you link the neocons then actually put the plan to put what you claim as explosives in the towers?
Well, there are also witness reports that the Twin Towers, in the run-up to those attacks, that security was pulled out and there was some very strange maintenance work going down in which the CCTV was turned off. Certainly, Marvin Bush, a brother of the President, has actually been involved in security at the Twin Towers, for example. And there's a story we were discussing earlier on about a group of Israelis who were arrested cheering the attacks on the day. And there's since been an investigation which establishes that they are connected to Mossad. So it's not like we're talking about stuff that we're just seeing on internet sites here. And another good example is actually the 19 hijackers. Now, one of the things I got suspicious about straight away was how do they find out that these were 19 hijackers? It took 2 years to bring indictments in Lockerbie. That's something I worked on.
Yeah.
And yet here we are, 3 days later, they're saying we know absolutely who the 19 are. And yet, if you look at the flight manifests, you can get those on the internet, there are no Arab names on those flight manifests. And clearly after that, the FBI was obliged to admit that the information they had would not have stood up in a court of law. Now that is bad enough, because the 9/11 Commission accept this uncritically. But in fact, 9 of those hijackers have turned up alive. And this has been reported on the BBC, the Daily Telegraph, the Guardian, and prestigious newspapers in the US. This is not stuff we're getting off conspiracy theory websites. But the 9/11 Commission makes no attempt to reconcile why the FBI is saying that these men are the 19 hijackers and why 9 of them are still alive, basically. That's a very good example of where the 9/11 Commission doesn't do it well.
I should just, though, flag up one of the things you said there, which is there is so much sensitivity about sort of anti-Semitism related to many conspiracies around the world. And I've read about this one that before, that there was somehow Mossad was involved or the Israelis were involved. I mean, does that seem credible to you, Jonathan?
It was reported. I found, we were again talking about this earlier, I found this a couple of years ago, and I thought, oh, here we go, another wacko theory. But actually, it's been reported by quite credible sources in the US. I mean, proper newspapers and magazines, and they're not suggesting that they were exactly. I think you're wrong in saying that they were cheering it. The report from it involved a TV van a TV repair van that belonged to a company that didn't exist, that was proven to be some kind of fake company, and there was a picture. They were taking pictures of one another with their van, and the Twin Towers were coming down, and the suggestion from the neighbours in, I think it was New Jersey, who saw this happening, well, not that they were pleased about it, but just that it was look, you know, we said this was going to happen, it's happened. And it sounds like another wacko theory, but again, there is a surprisingly, from what I read, a surprisingly high level of credibility to it. And you know, and we know the stories about that you know, haven't been really disputed about the Bin Laden family being kind of whisked out of the US at the time. Now,
but these all can be. I mean, they're not conclusive, they can be explained by coincidence.
And this is the problem with conspiracy
theories. Can I just explain things that can't be explained away? For example, how does, even if you think that it's a 757 that goes into the Pentagon, how does that get through the Pentagon's automated anti-missile defense system? The only thing that can get through that is someone who knows the code for friendly fire that day. And then in addition to that, of course, there is an 18-foot hole you can see in the facade of the Pentagon before it falls, and the picture's taken before it falls. But no damage consistent with wings or engines.
Well, there was an engine found on the front lawn, wasn't there?
No, not on the front lawn. No, there was actually a turbine found inside, but that's been identified as a turbine belonging to an A3 Sky Warrior, a US military plane, not to a 757. And
the idea that the superstructure of the plane was vaporised in the subsequent explosion, you don't think...
Well, that's what they say, but then they also say they identified 184 bodies from DNA. Now, if it's hot enough to vaporise titanium, it's hot enough to vaporise carbon, which is what our bodies are made of. And at the back of the ceiling of the Pentagon, there is another 16 to 18-foot hole. Now, that clearly means that the object has gone through 6 layers of reinforced concrete, each 1.5 feet
thick. No, I read about this. This is a cruise missile attack, right? I've read the conspiracy criticism.
So that is evidence consistent with the cruise missile attack.
Which begats any kind of belief, doesn't it, that the Americans would launch a cruise missile? From what vehicle?
Well, clearly they had to be fired by the American military again, because it wouldn't have got through the Pentagon's automated anti-missile defense system if it wasn't sending out a friendly fire signal.
There again, a friend of mine, and not a friend of mine, an actual friend of mine, watched the plane crashing into the Pentagon, because his office, his TV production company, is above it, and he watched the entire thing happen. I don't know whether he's been used.
If he hasn't actually come forward as a witness, because there are no witnesses of an actual plane going into the Pentagon. Lots of people talking about planes nearby, but then again, look at the expert witnesses. The people at the nearby airport, Washington Airport, the air traffic controllers are absolutely convinced that what they saw heading towards the Pentagon was either a very small military plane or a missile. And of course, they see civilian jet airliners day in, day out.
A couple of things I wanted to... Can I bring it back from